let's just jump right in. The first advice I have for beginner software developers is keeping the monetary incentive out of their heads while they are in their learning phase. The reason I say that is because when you think about the reward mechanism of the tech industry while you are in your learning phase, it clouds your judgment and it clouds your focus on your learning journey where you are not able to focus on the basics or the concepts properly. So if you find yourself in this FOMO mindset of trying to learn everything as quick as possible and not getting left behind, I recommend that you don't do that to yourself and realize that learning takes time. Everybody has to put so many hours in, sometimes years, to master the basics and get everything correct. So to create the foundation of learning higher level tech stacks basically. So if you are in your college, focus on basics and don't get into this FOMO mindset. The next advice I have is RTFM, which is a pretty common advice going around in the tech industry. Now, in order to not get demonetized, I'm going to leave out the F part, but it stands for read the manual. Now, developer documentation should be the place that you should hang out always and you should keep coming back to. Even if you get diverted into articles, blogs, or YouTube videos, you should always keep your eyes out for the developer documentation. Because at the end of the day, the people who created the programming languages can only provide you the best documentation possible for what the programming language has to offer. So keep going back to it, even though you find yourselves watching YouTube videos, is basically the idea here. The third advice is exploration. And by that I mean that if you are in your college, allocate some time away from your interest to explore into other domains of the tech sector just to get a feel for it or the fun of it. See, I'll talk about myself. I was interested in backend development, but I did my fair share of hours in Vue.js, which was relevant at the time. It still is, by the way. I tried mobile app dev. I tried testing frameworks like Selenium or whatever, but I ended up not liking it. I liked backend development at the top, so I stuck with it and I pursued that. So I recommend you do that because it will keep your options open, and exploring is always good for software developers to gain new perspectives on technologies. And what if you like something because of that and you pursue it and you can build a career in it? It will only add weight to your resume, which is helpful only to you. But don't take that advice too seriously. Don't spend too much time on exploration. When you have your interest figured out, pursue that. The next advice I can give you is resources. And pretty much the best resource is the developer documentation, aka the manual. And after that, you can dabble into articles or blogs where people share their individual journey of building things like a small application or whatever. Then you can go to YouTube and you can watch people build something, but don't get caught up in it. Be careful with that is what I'm saying. And at the end, ChatGPT. Now this is controversial because I am against using ChatGPT for coding, but I cannot deny the fact that ChatGPT is good as explaining code. If you take a code block and you paste into ChatGPT and you ask it to explain it to you what it does, then I feel like AI does a good job at it. So if AI helps you with your learning journey and helps you become a better programmer, I guess go for it. But be careful. I have covered a video on why you should be careful using AI. It should be right there. The next advice is GitHub repositories. And this is a resource that everybody has access to. So if you go to GitHub, you can filter repositories by the tech stack that you are currently interested in. And when you do that, you gain a perspective of outside real world experienced developers who have spent some time in the industry. If you look at a repository which has good amount of ratings, so you gain an outside perspective of how experienced developers write code. You find out about new approaches to solving problems, or you find new ways of writing code, because it's very easy to fall into this bias of ourselves, developers, where we think that we have the output, so whatever we have written is the correct way of doing things. But exploring GitHub with repositories filtered by the tech stack will allow you to dabble into other people's mindsets, and it can help you how to read code basically, because as a developer you're not only writing code, but you also have to adjust your mindset into other people's code bases, where you have to understand why they implemented the thing that they implemented. And when you do think about contributing to this GitHub repositories, please make valuable contributions and basically understand the code base that somebody else has written. And this is my next advice, that rather than focusing on what of the code, you should focus on why of the code. If you stick with a current set of implementation, you should ask yourself why you are choosing that way of implementing this. You should be able to come up with justifications of why your method is better than anyone else's method. That's when real learning happens. See, we have to understand that there are multiple ways to solve a problem, but we have to justify ourselves why we are sticking with one particular implementation of the problem and what are the advantages and the disadvantages of it. Basically, weighing out your options. So with example, I want to show you this statement that for a given integer n, you have to reverse the number. So if the number is 153, you have to reverse it to say 351. Now in the first implementation, you can see that I am dividing the number by 10 each time until it is greater than 0. And I am creating a second variable which stores the remainder of the operation and it multiplies by 10 each time. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is just converting the number into a string, exploding it into array, splitting it by no characters, then reversing the array, then joining them back together, and then parse it the whole thing. This is another way you can do this, and this works in JavaScript. But we have to ask ourselves why we want to choose one implementation over the other. That's when the real learning happens. So whenever you find yourself using a component in front end or using a design pattern in back end, you have to understand and you have to ask other people or ask around to get multiple options for your problems, and you have to justify yourselves that why you are picking this implementation over others. And this is where my next advice is: documentation. As a developer, you have to leave documents behind that describe how your code is supposed to work. Installation instructions, library installations, setting up the project, and viewing it in browser or Postman, whichever applies. This is something that we should focus on, and to the level of writing comments over functions that we write. One liner provides a basic description of what the function is supposed to be doing. Another line can be added on why you chose a particular implementation style, and then the parameters and the return type. This helps not only you coming back to the repository months later after writing it, but it also helps other developers who are taking on your repository to maintain it in the future. They can read your comments and they can get into your mindset, and they can justify to themselves, okay, this is the code base that I'm supposed to be working with. This is what it's doing now. So what should my solution be that fits in like a glove for this code base? So documentation is pretty much very important when it comes to software development, because when we switch jobs, we are often asked to write documentation for the code that we have written. So if you make a habit of doing it from the beginning, I guess it's helpful to you only, and it's helpful for next set of developers that are about to maintain your spaghetti monolith architecture. Just kidding. Okay. The next advice is choosing the right tech stack. And this is the only advice where I can exempt thinking about the tech industry just for this advice. So you have to keep an eye out on the local job market to understand what kind of programming language has dominated the local job market, which is around you. We have to realize that the number of companies who are using legacy technologies like PHP, Java 8, or Python are more than the number of companies who are using the bleeding edge technologies like Rust or Next.js. No offense to Rust community. I know Rust is pretty great, but we also have to realize that there are more companies hiring for other technologies than Rust. So you have to pick a tech stack which is currently relevant in the current job market. This is what sets you up and increases your options to get hired in multiple companies. Basically, open up your opportunities to more and more companies. So sticking with technology that has stood the test of time really helps you, because it keeps your options open no matter how many years you are in your career. Even if you have spent 10 years, you can still go back to PHP jobs or Python jobs or Java 8 jobs, basically. So this is something that I recommend doing. But if you want to learn the bleeding edge technologies, the latest technologies, go for it. It's great for learning curve, but just keep in mind the job market and the relevancy of that technology. And the last advice that I would give to you is my survivor bias. Now, this is something that many of you have pointed out, but I admit it straight up that because I landed my job and I have a career in the tech sector, I am biased. I do have a sense of survivor bias where I think that the things that worked out for me will work out for you as well. being a software developer is a result of where you live. If you live in tier 2 city or tier 3 city or pretty much a village and you have no IT sector around you, then it leaves you with no options other than moving to a big city which has a dominant tech market and getting the start of your career there. Now, because I was privileged enough to have all those things, I was able to move to Bangalore from Kolkata and have a job basically, and spend 7 years in the tech industry. I do have a sense of bias. So if you guys call me out on it, I don't have a problem with that. So at the end of this video, I want to say something to the Gen Z community that watches my video dominantly. I have it written down. Skibidi toilet, risk fam, you will not get caught lacking in the tech industry. So chill out, keep learning, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.